Hi, everyone. As you're joining us for this olive tree webinar, I think everybody's in the room at this point. So good evening or afternoon or morning or whatever it might be where you are. We're really happy to have you joining us for another excellent webinar presentation, this time by Susan Butler on family mapping and genograms, which I guarantee even if you haven't heard of it before or don't quite know what exactly this is, you will find it fascinating and I think very useful. So we're really glad to have Susan with us presenting tonight. I will go over just a few details about the actual how we'll handle the webinar and then introduce Susan to everyone. Perhaps you've joined us for one of these before and you know that we record these, and so for the benefit of the recording, we have any questions or interactions go through the chat. You have me tonight to interact with, so if you have questions for Susan throughout the webinar, so not just when she's asking for questions, but if there are questions throughout or she's asking for a response from people, you are more than welcome to message those to me in the chat, and I will convey them to Susan then so that we just have kind of an organized flow for things. And like I said, you are welcome to ask questions, pose questions to me at any time. And then when there's a good time to pass this to Susan, I can do that. We will also, she's got some excellent handouts. So as she walks through the genogram information, you will sit there thinking, oh man, in order to really do this, I'm gonna need some of these handouts. And so you will have those, not tonight, but after we post the recording on the website after tonight, these will be available to you as well on the website in a really nice user-friendly format that you'll be able to download and use for yourself or for other people, for teammates, for other family members. It'll be really available, easily available to you and usable on the website, probably tomorrow or the following day once the recording is also posted. So please follow up to look there to get a copy of that, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint afterwards. I think that's all the notes or the details that I have to go through. I'll introduce Susan briefly. Susan is a dear friend and a friend of Olive Tree. She has been an associate counselor, a visiting counselor with us for several years now. I'll let her say exactly how many if she remembers, because I've lost track. But all that to say, she is somebody who has invested a lot of time and energy into Olive Tree and counseling Olive Tree clients, and she really knows and gets the cross-cultural life and world. She's done work herself in many different countries, but lives and works out of California, the west coast of the US. So that's where she's coming to. It's a morning for her, so hopefully she's had her coffee to start with. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Susan, to take it away.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure
how many years.
I may have to put, I'm getting a feedback, so I might have to put my ears in. Let me do that. See if that helps.
Sure.
Sounds like I'm growling at myself, so. Sorry about this little technical detour. Okay, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm not hearing the growl back. So.
No, yeah, we can hear you.
And turn up my volume. I can hear you too. Okay, so we're going to talk about genograms, and they're known by many names: family mapping, family tree. You've probably used or seen or been familiar with some format of this. And what this is a more organized fashion of what we use in the counseling world. It's also used across the board in many other occupations and places. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the history, and then I'm actually going to have you work on your own genogram. Understanding family history is really important, not only for the work that we do for counselors, for helpers, for workers on the field, but also for our own personal understanding of ourselves. A wise advisor that I had coming up through school once told me that in order to be used by the Holy Spirit, we need to make sure that our own pipes are cleaned out first, which means we need to work on our own issues first before we can be used by the Holy Spirit to help others. So this is one of those tools that we can take a look at what's going on in our life, understand where we came from and why we think the way that we do, why we hold the values that we do. And the premise behind this is that understanding what went on generationally before us, before we were born, has a profound effect on who we are today. So you may not even know your ancestors, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Maybe you don't have a family history. You don't know anything about that. But unknown or unknown, those people and how they live their lives affect how we live today. So if we can gain understanding about that, we can understand ourselves, and then we can also help others understand themselves and how we work together as a team. So realizing that we don't live in an isolated world. We don't live by ourselves. We live in communities. We live within systems. And I'll use the technical term throughout this of systems, understanding systems, because every group that you work within, that you live within, is a system. We have a family system. We have a community system. We have organizational systems. So when we understand how those systems work, how do we, what are the rules of that system, known or unknown? What are the unspoken rules within a family that you just know, no one ever told you, you just know, you grew up with that. That, because we are people, and as we get together, we bring in our stuff from our own individual families, and we have to figure out how to work with everybody's stuff in the room. And one of the ways we can do that is by understanding genograms. We can learn what those rules are and expectations that we carry with us and that others have and bring into the organization. We can learn how to communicate our wants and our needs by understanding where they came from. We can also learn problem-solving skills by using the genogram. So that's what's really exciting to me about using this tool. And I've used it for, oh gosh, ever since I first discovered it. It's been part of my therapy, part of my communication skills. Everything that I teach has an underlying understanding of the genogram or the family system. Dr. Murray Bowen is sort of the grandfather of systems thinking. Long before he came along, it was the individual that was the focus. And usually, you know, we know about Freud and how he did analysis and all that stuff. Well, Dr. Murray Bowen changed it because his premise was looking at families, observing them, watching how they communicated, watching the roles with, you know, who's in charge of the family, who's the clown of the family, who is the buffer of the family. All of those family members, they're not assigned roles, but they absorb roles in each family. And think about your own family. As you go through your parents and your siblings, what role do you see them having in your family? And just something to put in the back of your mind and think about it. You know, family order, firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, all the way down. It's not a hard and fast rule, but they share similar characteristics within the family. The other person, one of Dr. Bowen's quotes is, "That which is created in a relationship can be fixed within the relationship." And that's what using the genogram is a tool to do that. We work on what's not working within our relationship with the people in that relationship. Another person is Monica Goldrick, and she took this, what Dr. Murray Bowen called was just a family mapping or a family tree. She took it and organized it, she and others, but she's done a lot of writing about it. She's a wonderful person, written many books. She's a teacher, she's a social worker. She also is a director of, let me get the name of her organization here. Multicultural Family Institute, and you can look online and look up her organization. But she said that all too often people are not aware of the trait, positive or negative, that they've absorbed from their families. And we and our families are likely to pay a high price in the present for trying to block out the past. And attempts to cover up family history tends to fester, influencing others born long after the original painful experience and relationship. So that's why it's important to dig a little deeper when we're in the process of understanding each other, and unearth those hidden things that we may not have thought about, but that are there, that are within our generational stream of values and beliefs and the way that we do things. Another thing that Monica said is that most people avoid confronting family issues because they can't see a way to change the relationship they find so frustrating. The frustration leads them to seek new relationships in which they attempt to make up for whatever has gone wrong earlier. And if these new relationships don't bring fulfillment, general bitterness and pain will most likely incur and increase. So that's the reason why we want to look at family stuff and understand our generational stream. What's the purpose? The purpose of having a genogram, it allows you to see hereditary patterns of behavior, identifies medical issues, psychological factors that run through families, and also run through other organizations and groups and communities. Genograms unpack family dynamics, some which have been there and present over decades. And as we develop as children, children are little mirrors of what their parents do. Well, their parents were once children who were little mirrors of what their parents did. So you can kind of see how it moves back through the line. What my great-great-grandmother and grandfather did in their relationship has a profound effect on the next generation, the next generation, and the next. So that's why it's really important to understand these things and identify them if we can. We can't always identify them, but especially with, when you consider adoption, when you consider immigration, when you consider not knowing anything about your ancestors, we kind of then have to sort of play a guessing game. I wonder if this happened. The more we understand how we have been shaped by the network of personalities and relationships, the more we can identify what we want to pass on and what we can change. And the beauty of recognizing these things, it's not bad to identify things that have been hard within family lines. It just shows us what we need to work on. And we do have, if we bring it to the present, in the present, we have the power to change the present. Can't change the past, it is what it is. But we can work on what we don't like and what we don't want to pass on to our future generations. And that's the beauty of working with this. So here is a genogram. This is what it actually looks like. And this is one that I did in grad school, and many things have changed. They've been, this here is how we identify whose genogram it is. And on some of these genograms, you're going to see a lot of different use of symbols. I'm going to give you some basic symbols, but realizing that people do genograms in many different ways, and there's no perfect way to do it. This is a basic, I'm going to give you a basic general understanding of symbols and ways to do it. You can be creative and do it in any way you want. So there isn't any hard and fast rule on how to do a genogram. So this would be me, because this is my genogram. So I've got a double circle around it. And if I were a male, I'd have a double square around it. And I use color to identify, so you can instantly see who this is. And these are my 3 children down here, my husband over here. And these were, at the time I did this, I had 2 grandkids. I now have 12. So obviously genograms change, and you can just keep adding over time. So what I want you to do now is get a piece of paper and a pencil, and I'm going to have you work on your own genogram. And we're just going to do basic stuff. So this isn't going to be a long, drawn out process. I'd just like you to have, and if you need a minute to go grab a paper and pencil, feel free to use pens, color, whatever you want. So get your paper. And first of all, we'll start with the basic, and I'll get into the symbols individually, but females usually are circles and males are squares. So put down your square or your circle and let's start with your basic family. So here, this is the marriage line. This obviously is the identified person who's doing the genogram. And this person is married to Bob and they have one child. But what I want you to do for your genogram is I want you to start with yourself, male or female, and go upwards and draw your siblings and your parents. Because everybody starts out with two parents. You may or may not have siblings. You may or may not have lived with your parents. We'll get to that part, but draw your parents, their relationship line for now. You can just draw this line. And then from this, usually it helps to put the oldest first. Oops, sorry. Helps to put the oldest first. So in this one, we've got a father, a mother. That's their relationship. They have a son and a daughter. This is this person's partner. So this doesn't go up to here because this person was not a member of this original family. Hopefully that makes sense. And if there's any questions about that, please feel free to ask. So take a minute or two and do your basic family. And once you have that done, if you are married or in a relationship, significant relationship, you can do a line over to that other person. And if you know anything about their family, you can do that too. But right now we're just going to focus on the basics. Here are some family relationship lines. And as Lisa said, you will get handouts that have all these drawn for you. So you don't have to worry about copying all this because you'll get the handout. And we will go through this rather quickly. So realize that you don't have to absorb all this information in this webinar. You'll have notes and handouts to be able to do this on your own later. So these are the different types of relationships. And like I said, there's many people that have different ways of doing it. And so you can adopt this way, or you can find another way, or you can make up your own. This is the standard marriage couples. This is engagement. This is separation. This is legal separation. And a lot of times I don't use all these different things. I just put a slash if there's a divorce or a separation or something like that. The two lines is divorce. This is engagement and separation. I mean, this is getting really detailed, of which we don't have to do. This is widowed. Cohabitation, legal cohabitation. Don't know what the difference is in this particular thing. It looks identical to me. So, and this one was new to me. It's a love affair, which is interesting. And you can put that in there however you want. Here's some other views of it. Marriage, they put the marriage date in there. If there was an affair, and this symbol, which is interesting, is family secrets. And it can be an affair secret. It can be a child that was given up for adoption that nobody knew about it. That could be a family secret. All of these things help us. Oops, I keep hitting the button. This is living together, which is the same over here as cohabitation. This one, they stretch out a little bit. This is a committed relationship that they're living together. Marital separation. See, we've already got here marital separation, and then we've got divorce. Here's divorce here. This is divorce and reconciliation. So you can see you can carry this as far as you want to. So if you can pick one or two things, if they apply to your little family, go ahead and put those in. And if just the basic marriage line works, or whatever works for you, just put that in there. These are some other interesting signs that I came across. This one here, which I feel is very useful for this audience today, is that we work within people who have lived in different cultures. So this is a really interesting sign. Also, the immigration sign. And in my original one, I don't have this, but I have my dad's parents were immigrants, so I could use that in their genogram. This one is fun. It's a pet. So as we get into putting together who lives in the household, we can include a pet. These are heterosexual boxes. These are gay, lesbian, bisexual. These are transgender. These are ways to put, usually the birth date and the age goes inside the box. Death, usually have the years if you know it. A lot of times it's just an X in the box because we may not know what, we may not know the date that our ancestors lived. This one I don't use very often. I don't usually, I'm not usually putting in annual income, but if you were an organization that needed that information, this would be the way that you would enter that. So if you have any things from this that you want to add, go and add that into your family genogram. And this is children. This is a very useful one. How we list children, biological children, and there again, circle or square, depending on the child. We just add a straight line down. See, this is the parent line. We've got the mom and the dad and their relationship line, and this would be the firstborn. Then we have a foster child. That's just a dot and a dash. And then we have adopted, and on my genogram, you'll see that I have 2 adopted children. So this is their line. Stillbirth, if you knew what the child was, then it would be an X across that. Information unknown. And as you go up further on into your generational lines, you may know that there was somebody there, but you don't know anything about them. That would just be a line with nothing. Oh, sorry, I keep hitting the button. Miscarriage, abortion, twins, identical twins have this line here. Fraternal twins can be male, male, female, female, or male and female. And then this is, at the time, you may not know whether it's a boy or a girl. It's just, you know, somebody's pregnant. So that's how that symbol is used. This is really helpful if you're working in foster and adoption. This would be an adopted or a foster child. These are the biological parents and their marriage, their relationship line. This particular couple was not married and they had a child. And this child was then moved over into this family, and this child was adopted. As you can see, this is the adoption line. So, and this is usually smaller on the genogram, because as you get more complicated into your genogram, you're going to find out that you run out of room. And so sometimes people end up being the little tiny boxes instead of bigger boxes. And this is donor insemination, what I think is an interesting new way of looking at it as well. Oops. I need to quit touching my buttons here. So, and like I said, you'll get all this information in your handout, so you don't need to worry about copying it down unless it fits in your immediate genogram. So this is, here again, a basic genogram. This is a couple that has a love relationship, if you remember those lines. This is separated. This is cohabitation. So you can see the different things going on here. So on the next level of your genogram, you want to do demographic. You want to put in functionality. That would be in the realm of, is there anything about that particular person that disrupts their functionality within the family? Is there, was there an accident, illness, birth defects? Is there, if your child is adopted, was there fetal alcohol? I mean, this is where you would, what is it that is different? I have a granddaughter who is autistic, so I would put that in her functionality. I would put a little note about her functionality. And then crucial family events. What has happened within your family that is notable? And on your genogram, you just you'll be writing little things on the side. Not everything is a symbol or a number, but just a little jot about what is important to know. So take a few minutes and add that to your genogram. And then the other important factor that we want to identify in a genogram is who lives within your family, in your household. This one is these are the primary people, and their children have left home, so they don't live within the immediate household, but they have a dog. Now, growing up, my immediate household would have included my great grandma. So my little line would have gone all the way up here to my mom's grandma, my great grandma, because she lived with us for 15 years. So she was a significant influence within my family. We had a lot of people living with us over the years. So my family line would change. It would, depending on what year it was, I may have a total different family circle. But I've had aunts and uncles, I've had cousins, we've had all kinds of people living within our family for long periods of time. So that would have a profound effect on how I view the extended family. So these are important factors that you want to learn about the people that you're working with. Sometimes you have grandparents raising grandkids. So we want to identify that. And then off to the side, going back to the slide of functionality, what is the reason that the grandchild is living with the grandparents? Was there a death? Was there drug and alcohol issues? What was going on? And understanding that and how that is that affects the family. Or maybe you are a person you're working with was the grandchild that lived with the grandparents and grew up with the grandparents. That'd be something that you'd want to note in your genogram. This is the fun one. And these are emotional connections, relationship connections. These are things that happen between family members. You can see harmony, close friendship, very close friendship. Maybe siblings were best friends with each other growing up. Maybe siblings grew up in a rural area where there weren't any other kids around, so they were their best friends. Is there distance, hostility? The important ones to look for, obviously, are the hostility, the discord. This one is distant hostile. This one is close hostile. Violence, fused hostility, disconnect. This is a really important one as you're working with people that you are placing on the field, working with on the field. What type of relationships did they have growing up within their family? Are there cutoff relationships in the family? Because this gives you a little picture of the history of how they work with other people. If there is an event that happens and there's discord, do they cut off and separate, or do they try to resolve? And this will tell you what the family pattern is. Doesn't mean that you can't learn how to work through issues if you have this in your history. It just means that it requires some work, because this is a natural pattern that has been absorbed down through the generations. So we want to be very sure that we're looking for this one. Obviously, any type of abuse needs to be identified, and we need to know that that person has been able to work through that abuse, because abuse is another pattern that is passed down through generations. Not always, but it is something we need to be aware of. These are just some other relationship signs. So add any of these that you can think of if they apply, maybe just a couple of these in your genogram. And there again, you will be getting this handout for later. So this is a picture of a family. And unfortunately, we don't have the identified person We don't know who this genogram is about because they didn't do the double, circle, or square. So we will just, for now, what I'd like for you to do is if you can pick out some of the things you see and let me know what you see going on. So I'm going to ask for some volunteers to tell me what you see.
So again, if you're joining us late, you can feel free to put that in the chat to me, just your observations of what you're seeing.
Does anybody have anything they would like to share?
We're not sure what you mean. Somebody's not sure what you mean by what you see.
Okay, as you see the lines, what do you remember what they are and what they look like and what they mean? Like, do you remember what this, sorry, I have to use my pointer, not my finger. Does anybody know what this stands for?
Yeah, so like, what do you see in the relationships in this family?
Yeah, yeah. I know this is hard because you don't have the sheets in front of you. So I'll go ahead and tell you what we see here. This one, we see between this couple that there's hostility. Okay. And between this person and this person, we see discord and conflict. And here we see broken relationship. There's cutoff. And up here, let's start with, this is the, we can start with how many generations do we see? We see this generation. This is another generation. So that's second generation. This is the third generation. And then we have a fourth generation. So I've got 4 generations here. So starting up here, we see that there's harmony between these two people. They got along well. They had a daughter, a son, and a son. And it doesn't say anything about this couple, but this marriage partner had conflict with this child of this couple. And then down here, we see that this is harmony. So basically, this relationship mirrors this one a little bit. This child, they had one child and married to this person. And there's discord here between this couple. And then down here, we see there's also a conflict going on here between the mom and the oldest son. And we're seeing that these people are very much in love, which is good. And these people have harmony here between the brother and the sister. So they were probably close growing up. Could be of age, could be circumstances, could be personality. And then we look over here with this oldest, that we've got conflict within the oldest son's relationship, or oldest daughter, excuse me, oldest daughter's relationship with their spouse. And then we have a close relation going on between this child and niece. So they probably had a close relationship. So what we want to find out.
Oh,
yes.
sorry, there's just a couple questions coming in. Maybe it's a good time to ask.
Okay.
Number one, somebody's asking, why does Vivian have a triangle? Maybe you can remind.
Yes, that would be, and let me zip back here to my chart. So I have way too many papers here.
I believe it might mean, if I'm remembering correctly, that she identifies as lesbian, but I could be wrong about
correct. That. Yes, you are correct. I wanted to, let me zip back really quick and we'll show you that. So yes, she does identify as lesbian. You can see right there is the triangle. And I want to make sure, and realizing that transgender and, I mean, these can get confusing as to what's what. So that's why I wanted to double check on that. So absolutely. Any
Another,
other questions?
yeah, another question somebody's asking is, you've mentioned both discord and conflict, or kind of a hostile relationship. How are you differentiating between a hostile relationship and there being discord or conflict, or is that an important differentiation?
It is important. And we can see here that hostile is this little, and we're looking at harmony and close, very close. And discord is this line, distant hostile, close hostile. So these are people that are hostile with each other, that are close to each other. So they had a close relationship, but it's a very hostile one.
And hostile is different from having discord or conflict. And how would you
Yes.
characterize the difference of that?
Hostile is there's very aggressive anger versus discord is disagreeing. That makes sense. If you have discord and conflict, you just may have really strong difference of opinion. When you're hostile, you're actually using attacking verbiage. Like it's close to and can be the same as abuse, but if there's hostility, you can be hostile without being abusive, sort of. I mean, any hostility directed at someone else is abusive, can be very abusive, but so there's a lot of yelling, screaming, calling names, that kind of stuff. That's what I would call a hostile. Then we get into the physical, the violence. That's where there is physical violence. Then we get into the abuse categories: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, those kind of things. Does that answer your question?
I think so. She's welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? And when we get into this, I mean, it's really good to have this chart, and as you're working through, have that handy. And I usually hand out this chart to people so they can identify those relationships. Genograms are very hands-on, follow the chart, because I don't expect you to learn or memorize all of these, because you may not use them, and you just need these charts next to you when it's time to say, oh, let's see, what does that look like and how can I put that in?
So another question that you may address later, I'm not sure, but when somebody is kind of sitting down to do this, not necessarily in the quick 5 minutes we've tried to do it here, but maybe sitting down to do it, both how far back should they plan to go, and how much paper should they plan to use?
Good question. Very good question. What I find a lot of times, and usually I give this as a homework assignment, or if I have the time, as we do in Turkey, we'll do it in the room because we have the time to do it. It depends on where they are in the genogram. Are we talking about a person that's young, that would be going from themselves upwards, versus someone like myself who goes both ways? I can do 6th generation genogram easy because I got grandkids, and my grandkids are getting older, which within the next 10 years, I'll add another generation to that if I'm still here. But it just depends on your person that you're working with as to where they are in their life cycle and how much they know. On my mom's side, I can go a lot farther than I can on my dad's side, because I don't know the family history, because my grandparents were both immigrants from 2 different countries. So there's parts of that that are lost to me because they didn't share that knowledge with us at that point. So you go as far as you can, and you use as much paper as you need to. And I've had to tape many pages together to make a genogram. I worked with a client who was Mormon, identified as Mormon, and there were multiple layers of paper. And every time we talked and we would work on issues, we would pull out the genogram, which was a big roll of paper that was taped together, because we'd worked on this for many sessions, because I had to understand the relationships to understand what she was talking about and who she was talking about. So it just depends on who you're working with, but don't be afraid to expand it as far as you need to go. Some people may just have a little tiny genogram that just has their general family, because that's all they know.
Okay, one last question coming through.
Mhm.
If there are two siblings who are not close but not necessarily hostile, which symbol would you say to use?
Um, Good question. Let me ask the person who is talking about those siblings what they think they would like to use, if you care to share that. That
Yeah.
you could use indifferent, apathetic. Um, you could just leave it blank.
So you can just kind of leave this solid line. I think
Yeah,
one of
not
the things
everybody
that you're
has to
pointing
have a
about,
relationship line.
yeah, and that these are like the harmony one here is colored green. So if you add in colors, it kind of denotes a special thing, but everybody's got kind of a basic solid line to start with. That if
Mhm.
there's not anything remarkable about the relationship, it can kind of just stay that way.
Yeah, and then you can see, I mean, there's no relationship lines between these people or these people. We don't know what the father or the mother-son relationship was like because there's no line. And so you can just leave it blank.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. What we want to know when we're doing these is what stands out to you? What do you see that when I think about these people, I think of like, there's some very positive thoughts about these grandparents. You know, it was so positive, so positive that they wanted to make a note of it. You may not know about these relationships here, so you don't put anything down. Okay, here's another example with a lot of lines. A lot of information here and very colorful, which is for me is very fun. We've got cohabitation here. So these people were not married, and we're going to get into what's in these boxes in a bit. But you can see this was a significant relationship between this grandparent and this person. And it looks like to me that this person is the one that we're doing the genogram about. This is significant, and I'm not sure I understand exactly what's going on here, but this person seems to be the one that the genogram's about. We have a miscarriage and a stillbirth here. We've got some abuse going on here and then down through here. So we see how this has transferred generationally down to this child. This is an important thing to note and observe that there was abuse from this father to this son to this son. Any questions about what you see here? And like I said, I'll get into why there's lines and colors and boxes. Obviously, these are people have died when we have crossed it out. And I'm looking here. It doesn't say when this is a conflict resolution style. This is cut off, meaning when there was a conflict, they would cut one another off. And this is a very important thing to note. The question mark means that they don't know the age or maybe the status. So, okay, the symbols for addiction and physical and mental illness. Alcohol and drug abuse is half of the box is filled in black. Suspected alcohol or drug abuse, you just do lines. You suspect it, but you don't know for sure. It hasn't been confirmed. The physical or psychological illness in remission, in recovery, a lot of recovery issues, but mental illness is usually this way. Alcohol, physical, mental illness this way, alcohol and drug abuse, or I would say any type of addiction could be placed like this. You can put smoking, obesity, language problems, serious mental illness and physical problems, and substance abuse. Basically, it's all blocked out except for one little corner. So these would be important things to note on a person's genogram. And I don't use this so much because we never really get to where they are, because we're just in most of the genograms I do, we're just using these symbols. And of course, this one here and this one. These are all great that they're in remission, but, and that would be important to note in a genogram. So this is an example of a genogram that is 6 generations. We've got the original couple here that are both dead. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the line that we're looking at. And these people had 1, 2, 3, 4 children. And because they've got names here, I wonder if this one of these people is the identified person. But we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 generations. And that's all really nice and simple, fits on a one sheet of paper. Like I said, a lot of times it's more complicated than this. So this is just an example of what a genogram looks like. We can see here that these were twins. There was connection between these two, a close relationship between these two. We see a cutoff between dad and this daughter. We see divorce here. We see divorce here. We see a lot of conflict going on here. That we see alcoholism here. So once we gather all those symbols, what do we do with it? We want to identify transgenerational patterns, both positive and negative, because not all of the things that we identify is negative. We may, as we saw in that one grandparent couple, they were very happy and very, they were looked at as being very positive. They had a very positive relationship. That's something that can be passed down generationally too. It's not just the negative stuff. We want to observe how people resolve conflict. What tendencies do you see generationally as you're looking through the genogram that someone's doing? Do you see cutoff? Do you see conflict? Do you see abuse? What kind of things do you see? You can also use different categories. Say you're looking for something specific. You can do a genogram that is all about work ethic. What was the work ethic of the generations? I know that knowing my grandma on my dad's side, I never knew my grandpa, and I didn't know my grandparents on my mom's side. But my grandma was one of the hardest working women I know. She was an immigrant from Sweden. She worked her way across the country, ended up out here in California, and was a nurse. And so that tells me, and just by knowing her and being in her life, I know she was a really hard worker. That was passed on down to my dad. My dad was an extremely hard worker, and he would work till he'd get up early and work till the sun went down. He passed that on to 2 of the 3 of us. Religious background is really interesting. To do a religious genogram to understand where people get their belief systems from. There again, going to my own, I have Catholicism, I have Lutheran, I have a lot of, on my dad's side, I have very religious, on my mom's side, I have very non-religious. So where do those, and me as a product of that, what do I gain from that? Where does my thinking come from? You can see that. When I did my husband's genogram, we combined it. We had so many different denominations and combinations of religious backgrounds. It's pretty amazing. It's kind of fun to find out. Education is something that you can do a genogram on. At what level did people value education, and what level did they go to in education? Values is another one. What do people value? And just having them write down a little statement for each person on their genogram, what, as you observe this person in your family, what do you see them valuing? Marital history is another interesting one to look at. On some of these, we saw a lot of divorce. We saw generational pattern of divorce. And also, importantly, we want to, what kind of patterns come through with addiction, abuse, trauma, mental illness, medical history, all of those things can help us understand the person that we're working with. I have a lot of addiction on my mom's side of the family. So that was something that I had to become very aware of and realize that there are addictive tendencies within my mom's side of the family. So I need personally to be aware of that and take that into consideration. So we can use this as a risk assessment. It's not that we want, this is never a tool to judge someone or eliminate someone. It is a tool for understanding where people are at and what resources we may need to provide for them. So when I say risk assessment, it's not that, well, this person, we can't use this person, can't use this person. That's, and also in screening, this is to say, is this person appropriate for this type of work? And so it's, and if they have this, like with me, I have alcoholism in my family and my background. So I need to make sure I have understanding and resources to deal with that if that ever became an issue in my life. For mental illness, is that a family trait that we see? And has that person had enough preparation to recognize what's going on within themselves and within their family members? And do we have resources available for them if something were to show itself? Also with medical issues, if there's serious medical issues that are coming down through the generational line, where do we place that person so that if something shows up, do they have the resources? So these are all things that we take into consideration. Okay, so here's an example of hostility, violence. This is the squiggly line. The very heavy squiggly line is connotation of violence. So this person has let us know that within this generational pattern, we first see there's separation here in this level. There's been violence between these two, potentially domestic abuse, don't know. And then we have the father who has had violence against. Now, this is an interesting way to do the line. They just do, the relationship line just goes through them as opposed to little lines going down from them. So like I said, there's different ways of doing this. So there has been violence between grandfather and son to not only this son, but this son. So there's definitely aggression towards the mother, the grandmother. There's aggression towards the sons. Because this couple had 3 sons. So 2 out of the 3 sons, there is violence against them, with them, involvement. This transferred down, you can see this relationship is mirrored in this relationship and is mirrored in this relationship, but is not mirrored in this relationship. And then this continues to be mirrored in this. There's violence between this father and son, and there's violence between this father and son. So this tells us, this gives us a map of what kind of resources we need to bring into working with the people. Obviously, I think we're working at this level because you can tell this is the person, sorry, this is the person that Genogram's about because it says me. So I'm making that assumption. So if we were working with this person, we would want to make sure that there are resources available to this person that deal with conflict resolution, communication skills, because we see a pattern of violence. We don't see that going on in this relationship here, but because there's this history, we want to make sure that this person has really good resources for dealing with conflict and being able to talk about their own feelings and emotions, because we know that once emotions and feelings are piled up and not dealt with, they become volcanoes. So that's just a little example of how we could use a genogram to help this person in whatever role we're working with them in. These are some questions that you might want to ask a person as you're helping, if you're doing a genogram with them, or after they've done all the squares and we're starting to work on relationship lines and all that stuff. Questions you might ask them. What do you remember about growing up in your family? What was it like to be a daughter or a son in your family? What was your family placement? Where do you place in your sibling lineup? And what were relationships like? What do you like about the way your parents raised you? What do you dislike about the way your parents raised you? These are just thought-provoking questions to get a person to talk about what it was like growing up. Were you close to your siblings? Are you close to them now? And if you're not close, what would it take to have a better relationship with your parents or your siblings? So those are just good thought-provoking questions that can help you lead to what kind of resources you need to provide for the people that you're working with. Questions to ask, what was your parents' relationship like with your grandparents and their siblings? What are relationships like now with extended family? Does your extended family get together and meet? My husband's extended family, he was the youngest of 6, I want to say, and being so much younger than everyone else, and because of religious reasons, they were cut off from the family, and so they moved to the West Coast. And my husband grew up not knowing his extended family. We're just now getting to know all these cousins that he had that we never knew he had before. How did you meet your spouse? How are relationships with in-laws, parents and siblings? How do your children get along with extended family? All these are thought-provoking questions to find out where we place these relationship lines. And questions that we want to pursue is, how will each of these areas affected that we've talked about, the conflict, the addiction, the medical issues, how will this affect a person's ability to function in a cross-cultural setting? If we place someone that has sensitive medical issues in an environment that has no resources, then are we setting them up for failure? Are we setting them up for hardship? Or do we need to make sure we have a contingency plan to make sure that they can get the resources that they need? What stresses have members experienced that may cause extra stress in a cross-cultural setting? If someone has a short fuse, putting them in a stressful environment will trigger that short fuse. So are we helping them learn how to deal with that short fuse? Not that we're saying you can't go there. We're saying, what kind of resources do we need to work on before we send you there? And help work through conflict and handling stress, because we know that any change in environment, cross-cultural otherwise, is going to cause stress. How do families resolve conflict? What did you notice in the relationship lines? What resources, again, do you need to provide for that person to be able to work through? We can all work through our issues. We just need the right resources to do it. So as people that are sending people that are doing member care, what resources do you have to give to these people as you discover what family issues they're dealing with and what has come down generationally?
Susan,
And yes,
sorry to interrupt your flow. Question coming in. I mean, you're speaking a lot to people who are working with people or supporting people, maybe in member care. Can you speak to the same kind of level of these questions for people who are just doing this for themselves, people who are exploring their own family history, maybe trying to
yes,
resource or support themselves as well?
yes. As you're doing this and exploring things, it's important then for you to say, okay, I see this in my family line. What do I need to do to say, for instance, I want to change this? I want to change this pattern that I see coming down. If you, for instance, have cut off relationships and a history of cut off relationships, and you say, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, then what kind of resources do I need to find for myself? Do I go see a counselor? Do I talk to a medical doctor? Do I, who's out there? Do I talk to friends about what they've done? Open up the channels of conversation to say, you know what, I don't like this about what I see, and I want to change it. So what do I do? So it's important not only recognizing it in others we're working with, but recognizing it and remembering first that we need to deal with our own selves first, whether we're a helper or work or placement or anything. But first me, first my pipes need to be cleaned. I need to deal with my issues first. And you're going to be a whole lot more comfortable as stress comes into your life. You'll be able to realize, yes, my family has a problem dealing with conflict, so I need to learn to use conflict skills. Where can I get that? What can I use? And then also, when is it time to refer? Well, I can refer myself. It's like, yeah, I need some help with this. Who's out there that can help me? Do I need a relationship coach? Do I need a counselor? Do I need a minister? Do I need a spiritual advisor? What are the resources that I can reach out to work on these things? Okay. Traits that you can look for: socioeconomic characteristics, occupations, education levels, as we mentioned, genetic and physical characteristics, disease tendencies, religious values, church affiliation, volunteer service. My family line has a very big, noticeable volunteer service aspect to it. All of the generations that I'm aware of, both on my husband's side and my side, have done voluntary service. So that's kind of a cool trait that I can recognize that's in my history, and it helps me explain why we do what we do. On the positive, artistic abilities, musical abilities, literary abilities. What do you see? And personality traits. Personality traits are positive too. It's not all negativity. We're not looking for negativity. We're looking for the holistic picture of who a person is. And all those things come down, positive and negative. What do we want to look? We want to also notice what cultural backgrounds and cultural experiences have people had, because those change us. Lisa mentioned that we have been involved in many countries. This started back when I graduated from high school. I went to Brazil and lived there for a year and worked with a family in an organization. I've worked in Peru, I've worked in China. We've done a lot in Central America. So those experiences change us. I am not the same person that I was before I came to Turkey. My work in Turkey, which I think is 4 years, I'm not positive. I'd have to go back and count them. But that changed me, and I'm a different person after those experiences. So those are important things to note. What's your country of origin? What languages were spoken? Some people grow up in households that they grow up speaking several languages. Cultural practices and traditions, and family closeness. Do you see a history of family closeness? That will help you understand closeness and distance, why you feel the way you do about family. And as you begin to work with genograms, we just don't have to do paper and pencil. This is Monica McGolrick, and I mentioned she kind of she's a wonderful person and a fabulous author, and has organized and made genograms really clear and understandable. So if you really like this, I recommend getting some of her books. She's written many, but she uses what I call figurines, and I do a lot of sand tray, and this is my heart. I use this technique a lot for genograms, especially with kids and especially with teens, but also with adults and families. I've done a family genogram where we did a basic family, just the family, not beyond. And each person got to put a character on the square. So obviously there's a big butcher block paper on a big table. So there's lots of room. And each person in that family got to talk about why they put that character down and how they felt about that person, and talk about opening up windows of information. It was the most eye-opening and fun experience to sit with this family as they talked about each other in terms of figurines, and how kids see mom and dad, how mom and dad see the kids, how the siblings see each other. So you can be very creative with this. And, your imagination is your limit. I mean, whatever you can come up with, you don't have to do standard pencil and paper genogram techniques. You can branch it out. And here's some more options. You can use stickers. When we went to China, we did this one up here in this corner where we use the figurines, and we use sand tray cards, which is another thing to do genograms. And that was really eye-opening. But you can use stickers, and it doesn't even have to look like a traditional genogram. You can make it an art project, and they're identifying who these people are within their life and what they think about them. And this one I love. It's an emotional genogram. It's talking about how you see people. Are they happy? Are they calm? Are they talented? Are they funny? And this person has identified the people within their family by their emotions. So it's a complicated yet simplistic, very involved, very creative, very user-friendly tool. And there are hard and fast rules on how to do it professionally, but you can take it so much more beyond that. And it can be whatever you want it to be and however you want it to use it, using the materials you have. You can use magazines where you rip out pictures and put them on people. You can use all kinds of whatever you have handy to identify people and emotions within the family. So that's it for today. I do have resources on the last slide, but I think I will not put that up right now. And is it okay if I stop sharing this, Lisa, for questions?
Yeah, what questions do you have? I'll just say, because people are thinking and maybe preparing to type if they have questions, it is such an interesting thing to begin to explore. Susan's given you so much information. I mean, there's so many different ways to do this, and it's such an incredibly useful tool. One of the things that I really tend to highlight, and I think she mentioned several times, and I think is a really fascinating way to approach doing this, if you don't quite know where to start with all that information, because there's so much, is to really pick out family values. I think that's a really an incredibly useful way to kind of start. I mean, the basic relationship aspects of things as well, but then to kind of identify values for each person, maybe generationally or between relationships. Some of the values that really stick out to you is really eye-opening, and has been for a lot of the people I've worked with as well. Mm-hmm. Just a little tip on where to start if you're looking for a specific place.
And I completely and wholly recommend you do one for yourself first and have fun with it. There's also an opportunity to call people up and say, hey, do you remember something about grandma? What do you remember about grandma? What do you remember about Aunt Millie or, Uncle Jim? Talk to your family, your extended family, and find out their thoughts and feelings about different family members. You can really, this last week took my mother-in-law to visit her sister, and listening to the two of them talk, and we videotaped it because we wanted to get these stories down. It's like, wow, we got a whole different picture of the family from the sister than we did my husband's mom. So doing that with people just to find out, because we are a product of our generations. We can't deny that. We can choose to ignore it, but it exists. So why not find out about it? Why not find out what makes you who you are and why you think the way you do?
Well, I don't see any questions coming through at this point. It sounds like people feel like they have a good amount of information to get started with this.
Okay,
Maybe.
good.
Yeah. So we'll give it another minute just in case. But yeah, in the meantime, just thanks for your time, Susan, in putting this together and all the resources that you provided. I'll just reiterate for those of you that might have come in a bit later that we'll be putting both Susan's PowerPoint is up with the recording on our website within a day or two normally. So check back maybe in a few days for that. And there will be some really user-friendly handouts that go along with some of the things that she shared as far as mapping relationships and mapping the connections and that sort of thing. Some of the specific highlights of things that she pulled out there. There will be some really easy to use handouts for that I think you'll be able to take and use both for yourselves and for if you're doing this with anybody else.
And I just want to thank Amber Nicole for making them beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I gave her the handouts and she made them wonderful. So
Yeah,
enjoy those. Thanks to Amber.
Wonderful ability to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have one question that's coming in here. Let's see. Somebody'd like to hear your thoughts on the balance between looking back like this at a family and family history and looking at Christ and focusing on him and being like him instead of comparing with people in your family, perhaps, that you may or may not want to be like. So the balance between kind of the looking back and looking at maybe what Christ has redeemed or changed in your family or yourself personally.
That's a very good question. And yes, we need to understand the past so that we can work within the present. And obviously, Christ's redemption in our lives is a very big point. And some of these things, and that's why I think doing a religious background, and when I say religious, mainly was there church attendance, what values did religion have within the generations? You can find out where your foundation is. And there's always things that we want to change because we're human and we're sinful people and things happen. And we do take that, our relationship with Christ, into that and know that Christ can redeem these things that are going on that we don't want to pass forward. But we won't know what we don't want to pass forward until we know what happened in the past. So we use it as a point of understanding our history. And we say, there's, like I said, on my mom's side, there was not a lot of church or any of that. My mom came into the church when she married my dad, and my dad's church history is very strong. And that became a value in our family. But I look at my mom's relatives, and that's not a value. So I see where that change happened within my parents' lives, which then gave me a really substantial value to seek Christ and to want to be involved in a relationship with him. So from that, I gained strength through that, but I also see the other side and realize that a lot of my tendency and patterns come through that as well. And those are the things that I need to bring to Christ and that I need to make sure that I'm working on within myself. So absolutely, that has to be, if we are believers and that is important in our life, that will definitely be a part of restoration of all these issues that we find within our families that we don't like or don't want to pass on. But unless we know it exists, we don't know what to not pass on. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. And it doesn't look like we have other questions coming in at this point. So at this point, we'll say this has been a good evening. It's a really useful tool. I think you've presented us with a lot of good information that people can come back to time and again and follow up with. So thanks again, Susan.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hope everybody has a good evening. See you next time.